It's time for a new series, Unsolved Mysterious Police Cases, Part 1. In 2007, a girl was wandering a beach in British Columbia when she found a sneaker. When she opened the sock, she found a human foot inside. Since then, there have been a number of severed feet washing up on shore. In 2008, they were able to identify one of the owners of the feet as someone who was suicidal. This caused many to speculate that the owners of the feet were people jumping off bridges, committing suicide, but it still didn't explain why there weren't other body parts showing up on shore. But this is just a theory, and people still can't figure out what exactly happened. Unsolved Police Cases, Part 2.
This one is brand new. I saw it on the news today on October 15th. Basically, it says there's been a jetpack sighting twice in the last 2 months in LA, right above the airport. They've been reported by airline pilots who have seen this person flying through the air. Like, I know jetpacks are kind of a thing now, but still, it's kind of weird and crazy to think, who is this person flying over LA? Right now, it's a mystery about who it is.
Unsolved Police Cases, Part 3. A man and a woman died one summer morning on the side of the road in South Carolina. The only witness reported hearing gunshots and a car driving down a dirt road. When they were found, they had no identification and they had multiple gunshot wounds each. No one knows who they are, and the theory is they were Europeans hitchhiking across America. All anyone really knows is that they were murdered, left by the side of the road, and their killer never caught. Unsolved Police Cases, Part 4.
Just a few days ago in Utah, the Department of Public Safety was flying around counting bighorn sheep. The officers came across this 10-foot tall metal thing just buried deep within the rocks. In this picture here, you can see just how big the metal monolith is. Any idea what it could be? I'm guessing aliens. Definitely aliens.
Since it's Black History Month, I thought it would be a good time to talk about courageous black police officers who reformed law enforcement from early on. The first two officers I want to talk about are Lieutenant Richard Arthur Jones and Officer Belvin Perry Sr. These two men were the first black police officers hired for the Orlando Police Department. They were pioneers who had to endure racism from not only civilians but their co-workers as well. They were hired in 1951, years before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The department didn't issue them guns or radios, and all they had were nightsticks and handcuffs. They patrolled dangerous streets only on foot and had to rely on using their words to defuse situations, a skill a lot of police officers could use today. The pair were heroes who paved the way for more people of color to join law enforcement. For Black History Month, I'm featuring videos about black police officers who reformed law enforcement in their day. This is Part 2. Georgia Ann Robinson was the first black female police officer to work for LAPD. It is believed she was the first black female law enforcement officer in the country. She was first recruited as a volunteer and later hired on as a jail matron in 1919. She also worked as an investigator in homicide cases and created a women's shelter in LA. She was eventually blinded by an inmate during her service, but that didn't stop her. She kept working in the women's shelter and teamed up with the NAACP to fight against segregation in LA schools. She was another hero who paved the way for more people of color to enter into law enforcement service. For Black History Month, I'm featuring videos about black police officers who helped reform law enforcement. This is Part 3 featuring Bass Reeves. Reeves was a former slave who was freed during the Emancipation Proclamation. He was hired as a deputy U.S. Marshal to track down fugitives in Native American territory. That made him the first ever U.S. Marshal to be appointed west of the Mississippi. He became an expert detective and would consistently track down even the most hardest to find criminals. As a former slave, he was illiterate, but he memorized all his warrants and writs. He reportedly never arrested the wrong person in his 32 years of law enforcement service. He survived multiple gunfights and assassination attempts. He was another hero who paved the way for more people of color to enter law enforcement service. I've started getting scary stories from not just cops, but other first responders as well. So I'm starting a new series to go along with the scariest things police have seen, but I'm calling this one Scary First Responder Stories. Check out episode 1 posted right after this. Scary First Responder Stories, Episode 1. This story comes from a firefighter in Reeltown, Alabama. It was a foggy night when this firefighter responded to a single vehicle accident. The call came from a vehicle linked to the 911 call alert system. They searched the area but couldn't find the vehicle due to the fog. Suddenly, a woman dressed in a bright yellow shirt showed up out of the fog, standing in the middle of the road. The firefighters slammed on their brakes, stopped, and got out. She pointed them to where the car was off the roadway. There was a man trapped inside who was unconscious. The firefighters were able to get him out, rescue him, and save his life. However, they couldn't find the mystery woman. They spoke to the survivor about his experience, and he told them after he crashed, he saw his wife, who was deceased.
She comforted him and told him she would go for help. The man said she wore a bright yellow shirt.
Scary First Responder Stories, Part 2. This was sent to me by a paramedic. At around 3 a.m., her and her partner responded to a residence regarding a woman with chest pains. They showed up at her house and approached the door. Through the window, they could see a young woman sitting at a table with an elderly woman. Neither of them moved or said a word. The paramedics knocked on the door, and the young woman answered. She said she wasn't feeling well and went to sit back down at the table, but the older woman wasn't there. They asked her if anyone else was home, and she said no. She requested to go to the hospital and went upstairs to get some belongings. The paramedics tried to use their radios, but they wouldn't work. The woman immediately came back downstairs, and she had a completely different demeanor. She refused care and told them they had to leave immediately. They left the house. As they drove away, they looked at the house again, and through the window, they could see the elderly woman sitting back at the table with the young woman. Scary First Responder Stories, Part 3. This story was sent to me by a firefighter. He and his team used an abandoned church building for training. This is when firefighters intentionally set fire to something and train how to put it out. After the church was mostly burned down, the firefighters walked around the interior. One firefighter felt something touch his back. When he turned around, there was nothing behind him. They later came across a burnt bookshelf that was partially blocking a staircase leading to a basement they didn't initially know was there. They moved the bookshelf but were unable to go down because the building was starting to collapse. One firefighter yelled down to see how far the echo carried. Immediately after he yelled, a voice responded. All the firefighters heard a ghastly scream come from deep inside the basement. They left and never discussed it again. Scary First Responder Stories, Episode 4. This is a well-known story from Chicago. On April 18th, 1924, a firefighter named Frank Levy was washing a window at the fire station. He paused for a moment and put his hand on the glass. He told one of his coworkers he had the feeling he was going to die that day. At that moment, a call came in, and his crew responded to a fire that had broken out in an office building. While fighting the fire, a wall collapsed and tragically killed 8 firemen. Frank Levy was one of those men. The next day, one of the surviving firemen looked at the window Frank had been washing the day before. There was an unusual stain that appeared to be a handprint. No matter what they did to try to remove it, the handprint remained. They even had someone take a look at the fingerprints and confirm the handprint belonged to Frank. On April 18th, 1944, a careless paperboy threw a stack of newspapers through that window. The window shattered exactly 20 years after Frank's passing. Scary First Responder Stories, Episode 5. This story comes from the historic Fire Station 2 in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Carl Kane was promoted to fire chief in 1950. He and his family lived at the station for several years. Unfortunately, Chief Kane committed suicide in 1964. In the years following his death, strange occurrences have led the firefighters of Station 2 to believe it is haunted. There have been reports of doors opening, footsteps, writings on the wall, and sightings of a mysterious figure. One firefighter explained his encounter in 2000. He was in bed at around 2 a.m. He heard footsteps approach him from behind, between his bunk and the wall. At first he thought he slept through a call, but he looked over to his lieutenant, who was still asleep. The radio was also silent. He could hear and feel the presence of someone standing over him. He slowly turned to look at who it was, only to find no one there. Paranormal Hospital Stories. This story was sent by a hospital security officer in Northern California. One night he received a call from housekeeping staff who said they could see an elderly female patient in a hospital gown standing outside. By the time he arrived, she was gone. He went throughout the entire hospital with the description the housekeeping staff had given him. After talking to every department, no one recognized the patient. He also realized, according to the hospital records, there were no female patients in the hospital at that time. He looked at cameras and saw housekeeping looking and pointing in the direction where they said the patient was. But in the video, there was nothing there. Oddly enough, while housekeeping was looking at that area, a motion light suddenly turned on. This story will freak you out, especially if you are home alone. It was sent to me by a resident in an old house in Fishkill, New York. He was home alone one night when the rest of his family was out traveling. At about 10 p.m., he heard a loud crash come from the hallway. He checked to see what it was and saw a vase smashed on the ground. The vase was secured on a table to prevent it from falling, so it would take a lot of force to push it down. He started cleaning up the mess, and that's when something caught his eye. Down at the end of the hallway, in the shadows, he saw a dark figure about 10 to 15 feet from him. He ran out of the house and called the police. They responded immediately and checked the house, but found no one inside. He was certain someone had broken in, but all the doors and windows were locked and secured, and there was no sign of forced entry.
The doors were even alarmed and never went off. The creepy part is, the house even had some indoor cameras that covered parts of the house that didn't pick up any movement. At about 1 a.m., the police officers left and he went to bed. But it wasn't over. Later on that night, he heard what sounded like someone walking outside of his bedroom. While in bed, he pulled out his phone and checked the camera app to see if he could find anything. He checked each camera, and the only thing that stood out was his German Shepherd in a bedroom downstairs. The dog was obviously upset, whining and whimpering. He went down to see what was wrong with the dog. When he got there, the dog was growling and barking like there was someone in the room. But it was completely empty except for him and the dog. He decided that was enough, and he called his cousins to spend the rest of the night with him. Good luck sleeping tonight. Paranormal Hospital Stories, Episode 1. This story was sent to me by a former ER tech in Corpus Christi, Texas. One night a few years ago at a hospital, she was walking back to her area after dropping off a patient. She saw an elderly man in a patient's gown standing by the elevator. She started asking him questions to see if he was okay and see if he was a patient on that floor. He just stared at her and didn't answer. She turned the corner and looked down the hallway to see if there was any staff nearby that could help her, but she didn't see anyone. She turned back to the elevator and the man was gone. She was worried about him, so she called security to help find him. While they were looking, the ER tech gave a description of the man to the nurses on that floor, and they didn't recognize him. The security guards invited her back to look at the surveillance video. In the video, the ER tech was standing at the elevator alone. She said in the video, it looked like she was talking to someone who wasn't there. I'm at Disneyland for the week, so I thought I'd give you guys paranormal Disneyland stories. This is part 1. It's common knowledge that Walt Disney had an apartment over the fire station on Main Street. There is a light in the window that is always left on as a tribute to Walt, who died in 1966. But before the tradition of leaving the light on began, a cast member was in charge of turning the light on and off. One evening, a cast member turned off the light and left the room. When she returned, she found the light turned on again. According to the story, she heard a voice that said, "I am still here." The light is now always turned on. Paranormal Disneyland Stories, Part 3. This is one of the more popular legends, with a backstory rooted in a true incident. The Matterhorn bobsleds opened in 1959. Several former cast members have written about their experiences when working the ride. One wrote about her end-of-the-day duties when she had to walk the track to look for lost items. Every time she walked the track, she had an uneasy feeling like she was being watched. The feeling got worse toward the middle of the ride in a large cavern known as Dolly's Dip. All the lights in that area seem to always be burned out. This spot is famous for a reason. In 1984, a woman nicknamed Dolly fell from her seat and was struck by an oncoming bobsled. She sadly died from the incident. Now all unexplainable occurrences are said to be caused by her ghost. That is not the only incident, however. In 1964, a 15-year-old boy also died on the ride. The incident is notable as being the first documented death at Disneyland. Scary Stories Sent by You, Episode 1. I figured I'd start out the series with one of my own personal stories. When I was 16 years old, I cleaned buses for a charter bus company. I had to clean the buses whenever they got in, so it was usually late at night or early before school. The newest bus in the fleet had just been purchased. The rumor was it was cheap because it had hit and killed a man who stepped out in front of it. I had several unexplainable things happen while that bus was around. One night, I was at the yard alone. I cleaned a bus at the far end of the yard and walked back to the office to go to the bathroom. I passed the front of every bus on my way and everything was normal. When I went back outside, the windshield wipers on that one bus were moving back and forth at full speed. I checked the cameras and no one entered that bus. The windshield wipers just started going by themselves. Paranormal Hospital Stories, Episode 2. This story is from a nurse in Ontario, Canada. She works at a nursing home that was converted from an old hospital. Her coworker told her about a paranormal experience she had a year ago. The coworker was working one night when she heard a noise coming from the hallway. She looked up in the mirror at the nurse's station and saw a patient wearing an old hospital gown standing in the hallway. The gown wasn't like any they gave the patients currently. The coworker got up to check on the patient, and when she went around the corner, there was no one there. The sender of this story has not experienced anything like that until just a few weeks ago. One night she went to the basement to put her uniform in the laundry. This basement used to be the hospital's morgue. When she entered the tunnel portion of the basement, she heard a voice. It whispered, "Help me, please." The nurse said, "Hello?" and looked around, but she was completely alone. Paranormal Disneyland Stories, Part 4. This is more video surveillance of a possible ghost caught on camera at Disneyland. There's been multiple theories to try to debunk this. Some say it's to trigger the light, and others think it's what happens when the surveillance tape is taped over itself again. Either way, I'll let the video play out, and you let me know what you think. Scary story sent by you. Do not watch this if you are home alone. This is another story from Toronto, Canada, sent by one of my followers. When the sender of this story was young, his school had late starts on Wednesdays. He was in his room when everyone else in his house left for work. He heard noises coming from downstairs and thought a family member had returned home. But things got very strange. Suddenly he heard a huge stomp and the sound of someone running up the stairs. The steps were so loud that it sounded like a bowling ball being dropped on each step. He was so scared he just froze with fear behind the door. He was able to call his aunt who lived across the street. She came over and checked the house, but there was no one else there. Years later, the sender of this story spoke with his mother about the incident. She had also had paranormal encounters at the house, so she called a priest to investigate. They looked around the house, and out in the garden they found the cause of the issue. Someone had buried 3 witch totems to curse their property. Paranormal hospital stories. Nurses on night shift, stay away from this video. This story is from a nurse at a small community hospital in Portland, Oregon. One night, she sat at a computer that faced a dead-end hallway that had 6 patient rooms lining it. It was a slow night, so there were very few patients in those 6 rooms. She was by herself and had the feeling like someone was watching her. She looked up and could see an elderly man standing in the doorway of one of those rooms. She was startled to see him because 1, that room was supposed to be empty, and 2, he wasn't one of her patients on that floor. She looked down for a moment to log off the computer, and when she looked up, he was gone. There was no way he could have walked down that hallway and past her without her seeing him. She got up and checked the room, but he wasn't there. She checked the other rooms and couldn't find him. Finally, she got with the hospital's charge nurse, and they did a patient count. No patients were missing that night. Scary first responder stories. This story was sent to me by the daughter of a firefighter in Baltimore, Maryland, who was a battalion chief. On October 17th, 1980, there was a huge fire that spread to multiple buildings. One of those buildings was an abandoned hotel that had been damaged by a fire before. A photographer on scene told the firefighters he saw a woman standing in one of the windows waving for help. It was common to find homeless in abandoned buildings to take shelter from the cold. They sent a rescue team in there, but the floor where the woman was seen had collapsed. They couldn't find any remains or any trace of her, but the photographer had definitely taken a picture and seen the woman there. The battalion chief later investigated and pulled up the file from the original fire. It turns out a woman had died during that first fire in the very room the photographer saw her in. Apparently, that photograph is locked away somewhere on file in Maryland. Paranormal hospital stories. This story comes from a nursing home in Southwest Virginia that is believed to be haunted. If there are any paranormal investigators who are watching this near that area, you might want to check this place out. One worker saw what she describes as a shadow-like figure enter the room of one of the patients. She immediately checked on the patient, but found her deceased. Other workers in the nursing home have also seen this happen just before a patient is about to die. But there's even more paranormal activity happening in this nursing home. At least 20 different residents have refused to stay in one of the rooms. They all described seeing 2 small children watching them. The last incident involves a resident who brought his little black dog to live with him at the facility. After the resident died, the dog died shortly after. Now to this day, many residents complain to staff about seeing a little black dog run through their rooms and keeping them awake at night. Shadow figures, ghost children, and a ghost dog. I'm staying away from that place. Paranormal hospital stories. This story was sent to me by a former security guard at a hospital in Greenville, South Carolina. One night, there was a motion alarm and a computer alarm that went off in the surgical wing. The security guard checked the camera system but didn't see anyone there. The other security guard called him on the radio and told him to meet her by the surgical wing. She said she refused to check it alone. According to her, there had only been 1 employee death at the hospital. It was a surgical tech who used to work in that wing. He had an addiction to general anesthesia and would often sneak to the area and get high while working. One day, after breathing it in, he slipped and fell. He landed headfirst on the ground and suffered brain damage which ultimately killed him. Ever since his death, motion alarms and computer alarms go off at random in the surgical wing. Some nurses claim that they have been grabbed or scratched while walking around in that area. So people who work at that hospital never go in the surgical wing alone at night. This story comes from an EMT in Texas who recently had a paranormal encounter. Due to staffing issues during the pandemic, EMTs in this area helped out the coroner to pick up deceased bodies. A woman on hospice had passed away in her home. The entire family was in the living room, and they directed the EMTs to the bedroom. The EMTs went inside where the body was alone and began placing her in a body bag. They finished and began pushing the gurney outside of the bedroom. One of the EMTs glanced at the bathroom attached to the room. The door was open and the lights were off, but the EMT could clearly see the bathroom mirror. In the reflection of the mirror, the EMT could clearly see a figure standing in the bathroom. It was the same lady they had just placed in the body bag. When she looked further inside the bathroom, there was no one there. There is so much paranormal activity documented at nursing homes. A CNA at a facility in Illinois sent me a story about something that happened to her this month. At about 1:30 a.m., she walked down the hallway when she saw a resident out of his room. He was sitting in a rocking chair in the corner of the hallway. She was confused because this resident needed a walker to get around, and the walker wasn't there. She asked him what he was up to, and he just stared at her. The CNA went to his room to get his walker to take him back. When she walked inside, she found someone in his bed. It was the man she was just talking to in the rocking chair. He had passed away in his bed. When she checked in the rocking chair again, it was empty. Movie theaters are opening back up, so here's a scary story from Daniel, who worked at a theater in Danville, California. At this theater, there were reports of paranormal activity from staff. Daniel hadn't experienced anything like that himself until one night at a showing of Batman vs. Superman. Daniel was in charge of closing for the night. He locked all the doors and checked all the theaters to make sure there was no one left inside. After he finished, he and his manager sat in the theater showing the end of the last movie, where a man and woman were the only customers left. Daniel got up to go to the bathroom. Remember, at this point, there were only 4 people, including him, in the entire building. As he was washing his hands, he heard doors slamming in the women's restroom across the hall. He described it like the doors were slamming in a domino pattern, one right after the other. He immediately ran out of the men's restroom and didn't see anyone exit the women's restroom door. He knocked on the door and announced himself as a janitor coming in to clean. He didn't get a response back. He went inside and found all 16 bathroom stall doors swaying back and forth after being slammed. He checked every single stall, hoping to at least find a child playing or maybe a teenager pulling a prank on him. But he found nothing. He was the only one in the bathroom. He left just as the couple and his manager were getting out of the movie. I hope you guys like this story. Please like, share, and follow for more. And if you have any stories of your own, send them my way.
This is why some movie characters might really exist. A scientist in Norway has recently been working on trying to bring different superheroes and villains to life. He started with Thanos, building a mold of him out of clay and shocking it with a new type of electricity to try to make him come alive. Allegedly, a few days ago the sculpture did come alive and began attacking the workers at the lab looking for the Infinity Gauntlet. Security was barely able to restrain him, and the scientists are now wondering if they made a terrible mistake. Do you think they should stop trying to bring movie characters to life? Or who do you think they should try to create next? This is why you should always be afraid of clowns. Ella was walking home on Halloween night when she saw a clown standing on the sidewalk staring at her. She tried crossing the street, but he followed her. Before she could figure out what to do, he smiled and began to laugh. She watched as he pulled a dozen red balloons out of thin air and held one out for her. The little girl screamed for help, running to an adult nearby and pointing at the clown. But he was gone. The only thing left on the street was a shiny red balloon that said, "I'll see you tonight, Ella." This is why you should always check your shoes for spiders. David was getting ready for school and was about to put his shoe on when he luckily caught a glimpse of something inside. He screamed and threw his shoe against the wall. Inside was a creature the size of a large mouse that was half spider and half human. Before he could run, the creature scurried over on the floor towards him and let out a screech. David shut the door and called for help, but when his parents came to check his room, it was gone. They told him he made the story up and he would still have to sleep in his room tonight. This is why if your dog ever barks at night, you should listen to it. Emma was about to fall asleep when her dog began to bark at something outside her window. She was tired and lived in a safe neighborhood, so she didn't pay attention and told the dog to be quiet. Minutes later, there was the sound of glass breaking and loud screams. Emma made it to the window just in time to see a tall humanoid creature without a face dragging the entire family next door into the woods behind the neighborhood. She later told police that the creature looked directly at her, and even though it didn't have a face, she swore that it somehow grinned at her. This is why you should never own a bunny. James finally convinced his parents to let him have a rabbit, picking a brown bunny out at the store and setting up a cage in his room. When the family's cat saw the bunny, it hissed and ran into the other room, making them laugh. They stopped laughing that night. When James and his family woke to a loud cry and found the bunny had broken free of its cage and was swallowing their cat whole. They later said it had somehow changed, now having 3 orange eyes and claws coming out from its mouth. This is why music really can kill you. Merry Melody is an urban legend about a young man and woman who heard strange far-off music during a camping trip in the desert. They were curious, so they went closer and met this. A creature 9 feet tall holding some type of ancient instrument and staring down at them. They tried to run, but the creature began playing an evil song and their heads exploded. The coroners later said that their eardrums exploded so violently that it was like a shotgun blast going off. Some people that live nearby say they hear a strange tune far away every full moon, but they never go closer. If you ever see this man in your dreams, do not speak to him. Ethan had finally drifted off to sleep when he began to have a horrifying nightmare. In the dream, he was still in his bed and saw a man standing in the corner of the room waving at him. Ethan screamed and woke up from the nightmare, but an hour or so later he fell asleep again and had the exact same dream. But this time, the man was 2 steps closer to his bed. Every night the same thing happens, and every night the man is a little closer. Ethan doesn't know what he wants, but he's terrified to think what might happen when the man finally reaches his bed. Have you ever seen him in your dreams?
These are the 3 steps to find out the name of your guardian angel. Number 1, get a sheet of paper and write your full name on it. Number 2, underneath your name, write "Who watches over me?" And number 3, set the paper on your bed or table and go to sleep. During the night, a glowing name will appear on either the paper or on your bedroom wall, but it will only be there for a second before disappearing. Good luck.
This is why you should never summon a demon. A few days ago, Daniel tried to summon a demon with his friends on Halloween night. They thought it didn't work until they saw a terrifying figure appear in front of them. Daniel barely escaped, but the demon took 2 of his friends, turning them into pumpkins and setting them in a great field of souls. Does anyone know how Daniel can stop the demon before it takes him next? Your washing machine is haunted, and one night a long arm reaches out of it and tries to pull you in. Do you A, unplug it, B, put a Bible inside and turn it on, C, ask your parents to fill the washer with holy water, or D, hire a priest to perform an exorcism? To find out what we did, go to my YouTube channel for the full story. If you see a ghost dog outside your door in 2021, let him in. 2 nights ago, a young woman was walking her dog Logan when she was attacked by an older man. He grabbed her, trying to force her into a van, but her dog Logan stopped him, wounding the man. But in the fight, the man managed to shoot the dog twice. The young woman was able to escape and get the police, but by the time she got back, Logan had passed away. The strange part is, the next night there were sightings across the country of a large ghost dog with glowing white eyes going door to door at midnight. Many think he just wants to say goodbye before he goes to heaven. What would you do if you found a coffin buried in your backyard? That's exactly what happened recently when a young man found a large coffin buried in his backyard while digging to put in a swimming pool. Inside the coffin was a black rock and a set of papers that looked over 100 years old. Written on the papers, it said, "Do not open the coffin or touch the stone. Bury the coffin again and never dig it up." The scariest part was, the coffin had bloody scratch marks, like someone was buried alive inside. But the coffin was empty. What would you do in that situation? This is why you should always own a dog. Jessica was going for a walk when she felt someone grab her arm and pull her into the trees. She looked up and saw a man who stood almost 7 feet tall, wearing a green mask. But the scariest part was that he had pure black eyes. He was reaching to pick her up, when her German Shepherd Donald caught up to them and jumped onto the man's chest, biting him and allowing the girl to call for help. The police got there a few minutes later, only finding a shred of green clothing that the dog had torn while protecting her.
This is why we all really have a guardian angel. Last November, a young girl named Amanda was asleep in her bed when she heard the window slowly open and a man climb through. She was too afraid to move, but as the man crept closer, something strange happened. A tall figure began to shine in the corner of her room. Suddenly, something bright flew out of the darkness, grabbed the man, and disappeared back into the corner of her room. Hearing crying, her parents ran across the house and opened her door, but when they got there, both the angel and the man were gone. Angela swears to this day that there was a bad man in her room and that her guardian angel saved her.
If you think your neighbor is a vampire, you might be right. Billy Atkins knew that his neighbor Miss Robbins was a vampire, but he needed proof. So one night he snuck into the woman's basement, hoping to get a picture of her coffin so that others would believe him. While he was searching for her coffin, he found something horrifying on the walls. Jars of children, neatly lined up on the basement shelves. Miss Robbins heard him scream in surprise, and before she could rush down the stairs and grab him, Billy escaped out the window. No one believed him about what he had seen, and it wouldn't be the last encounter he had with the terrifying creature. According to legend, which of the following is used to destroy a Wendigo? A. Fire. B. Silver. C. A pure heart. Or D. Powerful magic. To find out what I used, go to my YouTube channel for the full story.
How many people go missing in the United States each year? A. 1 to 1,000. B. 10,000 to 100,000. Or C. Over 500,000. I finally found out what took my father when he went missing. Full story on my YouTube channel. These are the 3 real ways to date a demon. Number 3, never bring them to church or they'll explode. Number 2, if they ask for a glass of water, make sure it's not blessed by a priest or they will begin melting. And number 1, make sure you aren't in the same room with them when they get angry. Demons have very little control of their emotions, and horrifying things have happened to their loved ones when they lose their temper. Good luck.
These are the 3 ways to kill a witch. Number 1, chop off their head with an axe. Number 2, poison them using lavender, nightshade, and garlic. Number 3, bury her underground in a coffin, and whatever you do, never dig her up. Good luck, and make sure to remember these 3 rules if you want to survive. These are the 3 real ways to survive if your room is possessed by a demon. Number 1, if you hear laughing coming from underneath your bed, never ever look under it. Number 2, if you wake up and see a little girl crying in the corner of your room, do not let her know you see her. And number 3, if you ever hear something walking on your ceiling, don't look up. If you follow these 3 rules, you should be fine. Good luck. These are the 3 real ways to survive a ghost. Number 1, never let them see your fear. The more afraid you are, the more powerful ghosts become. Number 2, never listen to scary stories right before going to bed. And number 3, never look into a dark closet and say, "Show yourself," 3 times. If you do these 3 things, you should be fine. Good luck. These are the top 3 ways to survive a mirror demon. Number 1, if you look into the mirror and your reflection smiles back at you, cover the mirror with a blanket immediately. Number 2, if you see a window or a mirror in the forest, don't look into it. And number 3, if your reflection begins to crawl out of a mirror, immediately close your eyes and scream, "This world is mine, go back to your world." If you follow these 3 rules, you should be able to survive a mirror or window demon. Good luck. These are 3 real ways to survive a serial killer. Number 1, always keep your doors locked at night. Number 2, never get into someone's van if they offer you candy. And number 3, if a serial killer is chasing you and a friend, always stay together. In horror movies, when people split up, they literally always die. If you follow these 3 rules, you should be fine. Good luck. These are the 3 real ways to survive a snowman. Number 1, if the snowman you've made becomes possessed by a demon, hang a wooden cross around its neck and it should explode instantly. Number 2, if the snowman multiplies and begins growing razor-sharp teeth, do not stick your hand in its mouth. And number 3, if you make a snowman and it turns evil, barricade your doors and windows until the sun comes up. Even a possessed snowman is destroyed by heat and sunlight. If you follow these 3 rules, you should be fine. Good luck building your snowman. These are the 3 real ways to survive a vampire. Number 3, always eat garlic so you won't taste good to them. Number 2, if you hear something scratching on your window at midnight, don't look outside. Vampires can hypnotize you and make you let them in. And number 1, if you fall in love with a vampire and they ask you if you want to be one, say no. You might live a little longer, but you'll lose your soul. Good luck and let me know if this helps you survive a vampire. These are the 3 real ways to survive a Wendigo. Number 1, if you hear a scream outside at exactly midnight, do not go into the forest. Number 2, if you are walking alone at night, make sure you don't accidentally cut yourself. Wendigos can smell even the smallest amount of blood and it will draw them to you. And number 3, if you are trapped by a Wendigo, the only way to kill it is by burning it alive. Good luck. These are the 3 real ways to survive a zombie. Number 1, don't let them bite you, obviously. Number 2, never let yourself get cornered in an alley or small space. And number 3, if a zombie outbreak happens and your girlfriend or boyfriend has been bitten, do not kiss them. If you follow these 3 rules, you should be fine. Good luck. These are the top 3 ways to survive an alien abduction. Number 1, if you see a bright light in the sky, don't run towards it. Number 2, if a green alien knocks on your window, do not open it. And number 3, if you do get abducted, make sure you have some type of cheese in your pocket. Aliens hate the smell of cheese and will kick you off their ship immediately. If you do these 3 things, aliens should leave you alone. For more alien stories, check out my YouTube channel. Good luck. These are the 3 real ways to survive Jeff the Killer. Number 1, if you see a young man holding a knife at the edge of the forest, don't go say hello. Number 2, never make waffles after midnight. And number 3, never ever go looking for him on a full moon. If you follow these 3 rules, you should be fine. Good luck. These are the top 3 ways to survive Krampus. Number 1, make sure your chimney is closed or locked on Christmas Eve. Number 2, never be mean to your family the week of Christmas or Krampus will have his revenge. And number 3, never write to Santa Claus and wish for something evil or Krampus will take you with him and you'll be his slave forever. If you do all these things, you should be fine this Christmas. Good luck.
These are the top 3 ways to survive Mr. Bones. Number 1, if you find a small skeleton in your room that seems a little too real, do not throw him away. Number 2, if Mr. Bones says, "Happy Halloween," give him candy, no matter what time of year it is. And number 3, if Mr. Bones ever says he wants to play a game, pretend you are asleep. If you lose one of his games, he gets to possess your body every Halloween. If you follow these 3 rules, you should be fine. Good luck.
These are the 3 real ways to survive Red Door, Yellow Door. Number 1, if you're playing this game with friends and you encounter a man in a suit who makes you feel uneasy, end the game immediately. Number 2, if you encounter spirits or demons as you open the doors, do not speak with them. They may be evil and trying to trick you. And number 3, if you find yourself in a room full of clocks, leave immediately. You could be trapped in that room forever. If you follow these 3 rules, you should be fine. Good luck. These are the 3 real ways to survive Smile Cat. Number 3, if you see a cat outside your door and it smiles at you, do not open your door. Number 2, if you see the face of a cat on the moon, look away immediately. And number 1, if your parents bring home a cat that never blinks and is constantly smiling, do not let it sleep in your room at night. If you follow these 3 rules, you should be fine. Good luck. These are the top 3 ways to survive Smile Dog. Number 1, never look at his real picture. Number 2, never say Smile Dog 3 times after midnight. And number 3, never share his video with 3 friends. He won't haunt you anymore, but he will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Good luck. These are the 3 real ways to survive Sonic X. Number 1, if you receive a CD in the mail that reads Sonic X, do not play it. Number 2, never ever play Sonic the Hedgehog at exactly midnight. And number 3, if you ever dream about Sonic, it is very important that right when you wake up, you draw his picture on a sheet of paper and put it under your mattress. Do not look at it until the next day. If you follow these 3 rules, you should be fine. Good luck. These are the 3 real ways to survive the elevator game. Number 1, never go in an elevator alone at midnight. Something horrifying might appear behind you. Number 2, never have a friend press the outside elevator button while you're alone inside an elevator. And number 3, never look into an elevator mirror and say, "I want to see you" 3 times or the elevator demon will appear behind you. If you follow these 3 rules, you should be fine. Good luck. What is the best weapon to use against a demon? A. Salt. B. A silver cross. C. Not being afraid of them. Or D. A German Shepherd puppy.
To learn about the 5 types of demons, go to my YouTube channel for the full video.
This is why if you're ever alone and hear whistling, you should run. Eric was driving home at night from his grandmother's when he got tired and pulled over on a road in the middle of a dark forest. He suddenly heard the sound of whistling from the trees to his right, and he froze. He heard the noise again, but this time it was closer, and he saw this. He couldn't make out the creature entirely, but it was horrifying looking, and it ran towards him, almost grabbing him before he drove away. The strangest part is, he never really escaped from it. He still hears it whistling every night, but this time it's not coming from the forest. It's coming from underneath his bed.
If you're alone outside and this whispers your name, run. Sam was alone in the park when he saw this step out of the woods and whisper his name. He made one mistake then. He didn't run. Instead, he began to talk to the creature, and he learned that it had been killing visitors to the park and eating them at night. It grabbed Sam and told him that he had to help it murder innocent people or it would kill and eat him instead. Sam had a hard decision to make then. Should he help the creature kill others and survive, or be eaten slowly himself?
What would you do if your wife was a demon? That's exactly what happened recently when a young man noticed his new wife had a birthmark that said 666 on the back of her neck. She said she didn't want to talk about it, but now the husband's wondering if the woman might be possessed, a demon, or even the devil. What would you do in that situation?
Is the devil real? A, yes, or B, no. To find out the truth, go to my YouTube channel.
You're about to fall asleep when you hear something under your bed call your name. It's telling you to look under your bed. Do you A, look under your bed, B, tell your parents and have them look for you, C, buy a new bed, or D, ask the creature what it wants? This is why music really can kill you. Merry Melody is an urban legend about a young man and woman who heard strange far-off music during a camping trip in the desert. They were curious, so they went closer and met this. A creature 9 feet tall holding some type of ancient instrument and staring down at them. They tried to run, but the creature began playing an evil song and their heads exploded. The coroners later said that their eardrums exploded so violently that it was like a shotgun blast going off. Some people that live nearby say they hear a strange tune far away every full moon, but they never go closer. This is why monsters come out at night. Ellen was going for a walk after midnight on a full moon when she looked up and saw a red figure flying directly above her. Its wings were incredibly loud, and she screamed as the creature flew towards her and landed nearby. She was so terrified that she threw her pack of Skittles at it, and surprisingly, it started eating them. The truth was, it was only hungry. Ellen has gone for walks at night ever since, and every full moon she'll bring a bag of Skittles and share some with the monster.
If a clown knocks on your door on New Year's Eve tonight, don't open it. Last New Year's Eve, there was a report of a clown going door to door late at night, looking for someone to celebrate the New Year with. Each time someone would open their door and say no, he would grab them, put them in a special balloon he had made, and they would float up into the clouds, never to be seen again. Last year, a whole town went missing because they were cruel to the clown, the only survivor being a young girl who opened the door and gave him a hug. He smiled at her kindness, patted her on the head, and went back down into the sewer drain where he lives alone, waiting until next New Year's Eve to try and make a friend.
If this creature knocks on your door on Halloween, make sure you give it candy. 2 years ago, all the inhabitants of a small town went missing except for a young girl named Tara. When police asked her where everyone went, she told them that there was some type of monster with large horns that went door to door asking for candy, but that her town had stopped giving out candy on Halloween. She watched as each time a family didn't fill up the creature's pillowcase with candy, it dragged them into the river behind the town. Tara later said that she was the only one who survived because she had a small Snickers bar her teacher had given her, and she offered it to the creature, who nodded, patted her on the head, and went back to the river without her. This is why you should always check inside your closet at night. Mary had just gotten home when she turned off her bedroom light and laid down in bed. She was woken up a few moments later when she heard something sliding on her bedroom floor. She nearly screamed as she saw something terrifying hobbling out of her closet. She said it was reaching for her as she ran by it and that it looked like a skeleton. No one believed her, and some nights she still sees the creature smiling at her from her closet.